Broadcasting live from the Winchester, this is The Monstrous Feminine, the podcast where horrible humans talk about horror. My name is Tyia and I'm joined by my bar crawlers,
Mila,
Louisa,
and Zeba.
And this month's theme is horror comedy. Before we get into the film, go ahead and follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or the Apple Podcast app. You can find all of our links on our Instagram at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast.
This month we'll be talking about Shaun of the Dead, directed by Edgar Wright, Cabin in the Woods, directed by Drew Goddard, and Attack the Block, directed by Joe Cornish. If you would like to hear our bonus episode on Little Monsters, directed by Abe Forsyth, then head over to our Patreon and pledge to hear bonus and extended episodes. We hope you enjoy.
This episode is centered on the 2004 zombie comedy Shaun of the Dead, directed by Edgar Wright. The film begins with his main character, Shaun, in a rut. His best friend is a bit of a loser, his girlfriend has just left him, and he's been at the same dead-end job for years, and spends every night at the local pub, the Winchester. However, a zombie outbreak soon shakes things up for Shaun, and he quickly takes the steps to grow up and set his life into motion.
Right. We take Pete's car, we drive over to Mum's, we go in, take care of Philip.
I'm so sorry, Philip.
Then we grab Mum, we go over to Liz's place, pole up, have a cup of tea, and wait for all this to blow over.
Why have we got to go to Liz's?
Because we do.
She dumped you.
I have to know if she's all right.
Why?
Because I love her.
All right, gay.
So I thought that I wanted to hear each of your zombie survival plans, but deliver it Shaun of the Dead style. Like, you know, he's like, go to Mum's, pick up Barbara, kill Philip, go to the pub, and have a nice pint or something. That's my challenge to you three. I will not be partaking.
Okay.
Well, only because my survival plan is that I don't have one. I want to die, so.
Where am I? Am I in my apartment? Am I in Brooklyn?
That's a wrong place to be during a zombie apocalypse. The rats would win that zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, New York is not the spot. This is probably, very not optimal. It's true. I think I would have to form a mutual aid network amongst my building and my neighborhood.
There are 20 steps in that step.
You were like, build a community, step one.
Sorry, you're knocking on doors.
You need to just take about, 50 steps back and simplify this.
Step 1, form an alliance with the bodega man. If I can only have one alliance, it'll be with him. Step 2, see if he'll let me use his walk-in freezer. Step 3, make a quick Trader Joe's run. Quick. Mm-hmm. Get myself some frozen items, bring them into the walk-in freezer. I think then I would stay in the freezer and either freeze to death or...
Why'd I go to Trader Joe's to freeze to death with the food?
Well, you could have a last meal. It'd be quite nice.
It could be something.
Not inside the freezer. It's going to be cold instantly.
Okay, quicker than this. We need a quicker, punchier plan.
All right, so there's. I think the next step would be, as soon as things have died down a bit, I got to take the subways. I got to align with the mole people, with the rat people, because I feel like that will be the only way to get from point A to point B, because New York's too big to walk it.
You're gonna go into an enclosed space with no exit. That is the worst plan.
Have you seen Train to Busan? The train was the best place to be.
It was not. I don't think you watched that film. Okay, who's next? Random finger says Tyia.
Step 1, grab my family. Step 2, get a ton of gas. It's going to drain all of our bank accounts at the current gas rates. Drive to the closest grocery store and get a ton of seeds for plants and also frozen food and canned food. Then I would say go online, rent Airbnb for undisclosed amount of time that is in the mountains in North Georgia. Go to Airbnb, sit there, and watch Netflix while everybody else is in a zombie apocalypse.
Airbnb will be up and running.
Who's accepting your request? I'm sure they want to post up in their Airbnb, for safety.
Actually, to be fair, I'm sure people would, make money in the apocalypse. Some rich people would probably. So, you know what? I'll accept that, but it's going to be mad expensive.
Minus points, yeah.
Mila, do your zombie survival plan, please.
Yeah, step 1, stay where I am and do nothing. That's it.
Do you think that your area would be zombified quickly? Like, do you think people would be stupid and getting bitten?
I think people would be
Yeah.
stupid in England and America.
Honestly, the more I look out my window at Crown Heights, I'm like, nah, I'm not lasting 20 minutes. People are out for themselves, I think.
Yeah. With Shaun of the Dead, compared to American zombie movies where it seems like at least one person is like competent with a gun, no one is competent. Everyone is just like,
Out of their element.
yeah. But it's kind of endearing. The Monstrous Feminine is on Apple Podcasts, so please go leave us a 5-star review and write us a little message. If you do engage with our content, you might just get a shout out in our next episode. It's our Witch of the Week. This episode, our Witch of the Week, is We Stan Horror Queens from the US, who left us a 5-star review from Apple Podcasts that said, "Wow, I am obsessed. If you love horror and don't have friends to watch it with, then this is the podcast for you. The hosts are all really fun and engaging, and the listener is part of the conversation between friends. Also, I love the way films are discussed through a critical and artistic lens. Love it."
If you don't have friends, I love that. Yeah. If you don't have friends, we'll be your friend. A lot of my friends didn't like horror because it's kind of a niche. So that's true. We can fulfill your niche.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you going on Apple Podcasts and leaving us such a lovely review. Hearing you guys say that you enjoy like hearing our conversations and that you feel a part of it is just the best thing ever to us. Hope you have a wonderful week and year and all your dreams come true.
Friendly reminder that we are also on Patreon. For £1 a month, you gain access to our Discord. For £3 a month, you get to hear a cut discussion from our main episodes. And for £5 a month, you get all that, plus a bonus episode. Please support us. Any contribution helps.
So you know how I'm like, ugh, I hate comedy. I don't want to do it. I just kind of like went off. I put my whole podcast sissy into this.
You're pussy.
And there's also like, you don't understand how many academic essays there are on Shaun of the Dead in particular.
That's so funny. I had no idea.
I've done a lot of deep diving into it. But one thing that I want to lead us into was, or pick back up on, was Mila, you saying that it's funny in English horror because no one knows how to use a gun and it's quite relatable. And
Yeah.
this review, it was on deepfocusreview.com, they said, these characters are relatable and behave in ways that make sense emotionally, as opposed to the dramatic, survival-minded decision makers of most zombie movies, i.e. they watch the news and they react to the zombie in the garden and they plan to rescue their ex and their mom. Like, it's not like an elaborate, thought-out action movie kind of plan that we usually get in zombie movies, and I completely agreed with that. I was like, yeah, this movie, I think, is most realistic. I mean, besides the whole, like, tongue-in-cheek going to the bar thing, I think this movie is, like, quite
I don't know. I
realistic.
think that's pretty realistic for some folks.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, maybe.
If that's your safe space and you don't know where else to go, like...
Their locals are their emotional support systems, and I feel like they would just migrate there.
That's true. Like, but English, like, boys, their relationship with the pub is unbreakable. That is an unbreakable bond.
Who knows how to shoot a gun?
I do.
Okay, great. We'll be
No
fine.
way. Mila, you do not.
Mila, you are just fucking with us.
I really appreciate zombie movies where like the zombies move slow, because if it's like the ones like World War Z or where they like can run, I feel like it's unfair. Like surely people wouldn't die and their nervous system still let them run.
For me, what zombies have over the average person is it's a sheer numbers game. If they have any other skills beyond outnumbering me, I don't think we stand a very strong chance. But these were wonderfully slow, enough to, like, you know, give yourself time to think.
And those South Korean ones are also feral. They're like...
I'll pull a sound clip from Busan of them, like,
Thank you, yeah,
gnawing
like,
on the window.
don't use that. Way better than mine. But you know, they sound like they're like frothing at the mouth practically. They get like rabid basically, and I think that's terrifying.
It's kind of like a different purpose those kind of zombies have. It's like a more immediate fear, and it's more like visceral. But like in Shaun of the Dead, like obviously like, it's comedy, but it's also kind of like things are just happening around the zombies. Like the zombies don't matter.
Yeah. Shaun of the Dead is interesting, like, because it's comedy to me is like the comedy of the cartoon show, the regular show, where it's like
yeah.
comedy, but it's also like growing up and becoming an adult.
How old is Shaun supposed to be? He's grown.
29.
He is not 29. How old was he when he played that? Simon.
When I watch Love Island and they say they're 21 on Love Island, I'm like, babe, you're cool 31. But they really are 21.
Simon was born in 1970, and this film came out in 2000. He was 34.
He is like the quintessential like white middle class English dude, Shaun. Like that is exactly how they would act.
I wouldn't necessarily say middle class. Well, I guess
Really?
no, actually his family is. Yeah, but well, we'll get to this a little bit later.
The Marxist breakdown that I see in this notes.
The way that I hear people talk about like middle class in England is always like what we would think of as upper middle class in the US. Like I was like reading this chef's article and she was talking about like shopping at Waitrose and like the essential stuff from like Planet Organic or whatever.
That would be upper middle class here as well, though.
Yeah, that's upper.
To be fair, we also do not talk about class in the same way or nearly as much as y'all do.
We have multiple like divisions within class brackets that I don't think Americans have.
Y'all are obsessed. That was the thing that like truly shook in me to my core. I'm like, I have never experienced, because like walking down the street, I feel like in whatever neighborhood where I'm in New York, everyone assumes I'm of the class that I'm in neighborhood that I'm in. Like genuinely, like unless it's like Upper West Side or something completely ridiculous, like you're gonna think I'm an upper class tourist or something like that. The way that y'all read class on each other was completely new to me. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life.
Maybe it's like lingering effects of having a fucking monarchy.
It's fucking feudalism. Y'all are whack.
I want to talk about the Marxist stuff. However, it first involves pointing out the fact that there are so many previous zombie film references in Shaun of the Dead. Way more than I could spot off the bat, but Vanity Fair did a YouTube video where they like basically did a breakdown of all pop culture references, but they do specifically cover like zombie references, which I thought was really clever. Like the whole thing, obviously given the name, is a parody of George A. Romero's like Night of the Living Dead series and Dawn of the Dead from 1968 and 1978 respectively. As you always say, Zeba, like horror is really self-referential.
And so is comedy.
Exactly, sorry, yeah. Horror and comedy are both self-referential. The most famous one is Ed says, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," which references the famous line, "They are coming to get you, Barbara," in Night of the Living Dead from 1968. There's a lot of impressions that I'm doing this episode. And then Shaun says he's like politely inviting his flatmate to go with them. And he's like, if you want to join us. And that's when his zombified Pete turns around. And that's kind of playing on what the evil force says in The Evil Dead from 1981, where he's like, "Join us." So those are probably the two most famous or well-known.
I have some other Easter eggs that are basically, this all stems from, sorry to get into this so quickly, the use of the N-word, which I think I had forgotten.
Oh, God. It surprised me. He's like, come in the car. He's like, "Get in!" N-word.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember. But you know why I didn't remember? Because I laughed. I laughed because I was uncomfortable, but like I definitely did laugh.
When that came around, I went on Reddit and I was like, N-word, Shaun of the Dead. And basically a lot of the like, oh, it's because he's a gamer. He would just like have that vocabulary, blah, blah, blah.
I thought he was imitating Flavor Flav.
Like gamers are known to do. Gamers are always imitating Flavor Flav. I don't know if you've noticed.
Someone very helpfully did point out that the repeated line where people keep saying, "You've got red on you," it's obviously like a play on like it being blood, the red pen, but it's also a line from a video game that Nick Frost's character, what is he called? Ed? No, maybe Ed.
Yeah.
He's playing Time Splitters too, and they have that line. So that's where that's from.
But what does that have to do with the N-word?
It's just how I got to the Easter egg.
He just said it for pure bands. And like British early 2000s comedy is a minefield.
Most comedy stuff, if you go back and watch it, did not age well.
I think this one actually did, bar that the one moment where I was like, too far.
Even when stuff doesn't age well, it doesn't necessarily like make me not like the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Mean Girls aged well at all, but I still think it's like a fun watch. But this is obviously much better than Mean Girls.
So, the reason I was getting into the Night of the Living Dead references was just because it then leads on to the Marxist reading quite nicely. In that many people view the original kind of Living Dead series as a capitalist critique, being that the zombies, like, excessive cannibalistic consumption is reflective of the thoughtless and excessive need for endless consumption fueled by capitalist systems. Academics talking about Shaun of the Dead kind of pointed out, like, how this kind of builds on that in specific ways. So Shelley Reese, in their academic essay, I love this title, first of all. The Queer and the Dead, The Transgressive Sexuality in Shaun of the Dead.
Hold on.
We will get into that. There's also a queer reading coming up.
I'm currently that Julia Louis-Dreyfus meme where it's like, collapse nervously. What the fuck?
No, this is my favorite part of every episode when Louisa brings a reading that I am completely unprepared for. I just strap in and I get ready to agree.
I love that I only do it for the most ridiculous films that we do, like Gremlins and Shaun of the Dead. But yeah, so this, Shelley Reese points out that the film's like a Marxist commentary on labor alienation, e.g. the scenes of like English people like going on the bus to work and they're basically like indistinguishable from the zombies later on, because obviously the audience knows what this film's gonna be. You're like, they already look like zombies. So in that way. And then Lindsay Decker, in their academic essay, British Cinema is Undead, American Horror, British Comedy, and Generic Hybridity in Shaun of the Dead. They make a similar point, and they link this to new labor's economy, which led to, and I quote, the zombified nature of work in Britain's service economy specifically, which is mindless and repetitive. She goes one further to suggest that this film also hints at the treatment of workers being exploitative. And I thought that was actually really interesting, because in the final TV segment at the very end of the film, where they like show what's happened now that there are some zombies integrated in society, you have this point where they're like, oh, the zombies can work at the supermarket and do these like mindless repetitive jobs. But in that same montage, you have zombies being humiliated on a game show, like treated as like bait. And then also you have another who's being seduced by his wife, like post zombie transformation. So it's like, it's kind of showing that these are like all forms of exploitation. So it basically is kind of positing a Marxist critique in that way. It's kind of those things where I was like reading these essays and I was like, this is so wild. But then I was like, you're making a lot of really good points as well.
I think a lot of English comedy, I don't want to say anti-capitalist because I don't think it fundamentally is. I think it has a lot of jokes around, like you say, that mindless labor, going to work, that kind of motion everyone goes through. But I don't ever think it takes it further than that. I think it's like a sort of collective complaint.
I've noticed that media that critiques capitalism that comes out of countries where the majority of workers work in jobs like that are menial are very different. So where lots of people work in factories, lots of people work in manufacturing, lots of people commute to work in the same way. Like it's very industrialized in that way. The critiques that come out of those medias are usually A, not comedy, and B, like hit more directly. Like I think people outside of the UK do not think of the average like working class person as like a bad boy. I think they imagine something else, and it is to the benefit of propaganda that people believe that the average person does not work a job like that. Like it makes the country seem more appealing in a place that doesn't exploit people. So it's like weird that they always do it in comedy. You're right.
So much about English culture and the way middle-class white people, that's like what I can speak to. There's such a like passivity to a terrible life. You're like, oh, obviously this is bad. I know the system isn't fair and I know it's not working. If someone's like, oh, we should do something about it, be like, what are you talking about? We can't do something.
There's a lot of apathy. And maybe comedy kind of neutralizes it.
I'm not sure how radical it actually was meaning to be.
Yeah, meaning to be, I think. Yeah.
This, to me, like, this movie is like comedy in the same way as like Fleabag, like those quirky British comedies where it's like the person's an adult but they're not where society expects them to be for their age. They get stuff wrong, they fuck up a lot. And like this movie, to me, like the zombies felt less like a critique of capitalism and more like a critique of conforming to what adulthood is supposed to be like. Where you're like supposed to have like this stable relationship and you're supposed to eventually buy a house and have this stable job. And so like everyone around you at that age starts to have those things. And if you don't, then you feel like the only person who's standing out from like this field of zombies per se. And like the ending to me feels like he kind of finds like his own way of adulthood. By like keeping his best friend, who's now zombie, like in the shed to go play video games, and like keeping that side of himself very much like intact, while also having the side of him that's with the partner and has saved the day and conformed to this life, but still has like the side of him that kicks it with the boys and plays video games, because I think so much of like the way that adulthood is defined is by letting go of playing video games and going out and just like sitting home in boredom drinking wine and having dinner parties that you don't enjoy and doing things that you hate and going to a job you hate. And that's not necessarily the way that it has to be. And of course, like that also is a symptom of capitalism, having like specific expectations of what someone should be doing for age and what is productive and what should people be doing to contribute to society. But like this to me felt like a very fun movie to watch in your 20s when like everyone around you is getting married and having kids. And I feel like I've talked about this type of themes a lot, but that is because I am in my 20s and everyone I know is getting married and having kids.
A lot of the critics use exactly what you say, Tyia, but for their queer reading.
Oh, no, that makes sense. No, Louisa, you're about to blow my mind. I know you're about to blow my mind.
Okay, guys, strap in. I'm gonna take you through the readings. Like, they kind of tell a narrative, so you gotta hop on with me. And I've got to start first with a little bit of Mon Femme, which is the psychosexual reading. So in Shelley Reese's academic essay, like I said, The Queer and the Dead, the Transgressive Sexuality, they really focus on the Freudian / Oedipal kind of aspect of it, in that he hates his stepdad, and he also wants to kill his stepdad, like, immediately. Like, immediately. The second chaos breaks out, he's like, I gotta kill Philip. He also calls Philip a motherfucker, and he points a cricket bat at him, but then he lowers it because Philip kind of emasculates him. And his mom also makes jokes which emasculate him. When he points the cricket bat and he's trying to be all macho, she's like, oh, darling, you should put that in the yard sale. And just like doesn't get the point at all. And then he gets phone calls from his girlfriend and his mother, and they're very much confused. And there's sexual jokes about his mother and his girlfriend, from Ed. He gives his girlfriend Liz flowers that he bought for his mother. Like, they're very crossed over. So there is a lot of
I did notice that.
So there's a lot of like, obviously you can supercharge that with some Freudian reading of it, because like it's, yeah, he's a mama's boy, and the point is that he hasn't grown up, but there's an obvious like Freud interpretation there. And you could see it a little bit as Creed as well. Like, if you think archaic mother, because he does actually have to kill his mother when she turns to a zombie and wants to eat him again, which is like, archaic mother loves reincorporation, bringing back into her body. So him killing his mother is like the final part of like growing up.
Shut up. I mean, carry on, but shut up.
This is what other people have pointed out. This leads us to, there's Catherine A. Cady and Thomas Oates' essay, Family Splatters, Rescuing Heteronormativity from the Zombie Apocalypse. I don't have any specific quotes there, but overall, they talk about how zombie movies really sentimentalize the nuclear family. And they do, because it's always like, let me go rescue my immediate family, which you would do. I'm not saying that's necessarily unrelatable, but there is like a glorification of like that core nuclear family structure. Okay, and then Shelley Reese, again, basically, they locate Ed as
You're gonna tell me he's gay. I'm gonna have some things going on in my brain.
I'm not saying that he's gay, if that's what you want. Shelley Reese locates Ed as his libido, because in the very beginning, when Liz is like, we need more time together, it would be nice if we could, and then Ed in the background goes, fuck! So it's kind of like saying that he's the reason that they can't fuck.
Oh, the joke about them being like together and boyfriends.
There's also that joke. He says he's not my boyfriend, and then he says thanks babe and winks.
I think they're
I think they're in love.
Basically, Reese then says nothing about their relationship actually really changes at the end. Like, Shaun still gets to keep Ed, and they still have an immensely mundane life, which revolves around going to the pub, and Liz is just happy with it. He's even more dead weight now. Like, he's literally dead weight. He's a zombie. So why would it be acceptable for Ed to be in his life? So I thought that made sense. Linda Blake, similarly in The Wounds of Nations, Horror, Cinema, and Historical Trauma and National Identity, says that there's a moralistic ending where the film possesses an, quote, insistently heterosexist logic, end quote, that requires Shaun to, quote, repress his adolescent yearning for homosocial camaraderie and redirect his desire towards heterosexual romance, domesticity, and putative paternity in order to come fully to a life and face his responsibilities as a heterosexual and a man.
Edgar Wright's doing none of this. I'm sorry.
Hear me out. This is like very similar to the Striking Vipers episode of Black Mirror, where he was fucking his friend in the video game.
Yeah.
This is something I've been talking about for weeks. That straight men, I'm doing air quotes for the listeners, that straight men hate women so much that they are gay. The way that if they were attracted to their friends, would be fucking their friends, would be in relationships with their friends. Like the way they don't want to talk to women, they don't want to have to do anything with women. They just want to have sex. And they think that the exchange or the transaction is like, I have to like talk to women and be nice to them and do X, Y, and Z and get them things and take them out and do whatever to get sex. I don't think if sex was off the table that men would be talking to women at all, a lot of the time. Their homosocial bonds are so important to them to the point that like they cannot even acknowledge that they might even be a tinge romantic.
Louisa, I might agree with that point if, let's say when the joke was made that Ed is Shaun's boyfriend, if they were like defensive about it, I might agree with you. It's like, we're not gay, fuck you, man. Then yeah.
He does say he's not my boyfriend.
But then he, you know, like he winks at him. He's like, oh, babe, get me a pint or something. It's a joke.
Yeah.
I think they're secure in their sexuality, but whether or not I'm secure in it.
I get what Zeba's saying in the sense that it does seem like a lot of straight guys hate women, particularly also if we're talking about stiffy British guys. Like,
when you said stiffy, I didn't know where you were going with it.
Okay, mind out the gutter, children. But, you know, like stiff British men when they're like, my wives are such nags, you know? And it is like, why are you married? Like, why did you marry them?
They don't like being around women.
I think what you said about that, Tyia, is that, like, he finds his own version of adulthood was most applicable or relevant to this queer reading because Lindsay Decker and Shelley Reese had said that, like, he doesn't actually like have to leave much behind. Like he can still have a relationship with his best friend, and actually his bond with his friend is stronger than with Liz because it transcends like zombification, whereas he and Liz almost broke up because of a dinner reservation. You know what I mean? Like it's like way more fragile in comparison to their relationship. And then he basically still gets to keep it, but he's just like closeted. Like now because like Ed's been moved into the shed, it's like an acceptable
he's in the closet.
Yeah, he's in the closet, and Liz is no longer threatened by the relationship. Thank you for listening to The Monstrous Feminine. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, SoundCloud, and Spotify at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast, and on Twitter at The MonFemPod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and follow us on TikTok at The Monstrous Feminine Pod. Brooms up, witches out.